Hey folks, welcome. This is Dag. So I'm making in this video some cowlings for my Flex Otter, and they're fiberglass. They're not super high quality, but I just wanted to share how I made them, and hopefully you can learn something from these. Now, the reason I did this was the original cowlings that come with it, and folks, I'm not sure what's causing this, but the top of the cowlings are melting a little bit. And I've heard some people say it's because of the outside air temperature, but here in Indiana where this happened, it wasn't that hot. So I don't know if it's the heat from the motors after you land. I don't know what the quality of this plastic they use to vacuum form these with, but they melt a little bit. And I'm not knocking Flex, but I just wanted to make my own cowlings. So if you don't know much about me, I love to build all of my own designs, but I got into foamies a couple of years ago. But the fiberglass I'm going to show you in this, I'm going to use a silicone mold. I'm not using the traditional molds like I've used on my past projects. Like the C-130 had a reverse mold, and well, actually on the fuselage had a reverse mold, but the other components had regular molds that I had to make to pull the parts from, which means I had to build the plugs and stuff. But I didn't want to go through all of that just to make a couple of cowlings for a otter, you know? So let's get into this. Now, this is all the stuff I used to make this, which makes this look super complicated. But folks, this wasn't that complicated. I just wanted to make a silicone mold so I could easily, make some parts in it. So basically, I use the West system for the epoxy. I'm going to make the cowls out of. I used a silicone kit. I'll talk more about that in a minute. I used the fiberglass. I had to 3D print a plug and all the different parts and pieces. And I'll get into this a little bit more. So one thing is, folks, I'm not sure, and I want to give credit to whoever did this, but somebody on the internet built a cowling for the Flex Otter, and somebody sent me the file for it, the STL file, which then I modified to make a solid so I could make a plug out of it. So if you're the person, excuse me, that made this, let me know. I then made basically a 3D printed dam that's going to hold all the silicone material together so that I can create my mold. And folks, this is just me throwing together really simple, quick stuff. I did test fit to make sure everything's going to be in there. Now, you need to make this big enough so that the mold itself is rigid enough that it will hold the shape of the cowling. If you try to save the silicone material and make the mold itself really, really small, you might get into some troubles doing that. That's one reason I left some room. Now, I know the silicone stuff's not cheap. It's like $80. Just in silicone to make this mold, but you want to make sure you've got enough mold material that it's going to be rigid. And you also want to make sure there's enough mold material there that the part is completely covered. So I 3D printed the part. I then primed it. I painted it. Well, I primed and sand, and I tried to get all the lines out, and I still have a few of the 3D printed lines in there. I then epoxied it to a plexiglass piece, and the dam parts you see around it, I used regular blue tape as the gasket. So I screwed this all together really, really tight, keeping my fingers crossed I didn't have any leaks. And basically, folks, you just pour in the silicone material here and you let it sit for a long time. I let mine set 6 hours. They recommend 3 to 5 hours, but 6 hours is what works the best for me. And here you see the fiberglass, and the reason I draw these lines in it is so when I put the fiberglass into the mold, I can overlap things, okay? You want to make sure there's a certain overlap. You don't want to make this too heavy, but you don't want it to be too thin in places, okay? So I then cut up all my little pieces of fiberglass like this, and folks, you're going to screw up the first couple of pieces you make because there's going to be a new technique you got to learn when you're putting this into the mold, okay? And here you can see where I kind of overlapped the pieces and tried to use the black lines I did to align to make sure I had 2 layers of this 2.5 ounce cloth. My first one I popped out, I tell you, I was really super stoked, folks. This turned out really kick-ass for the first, well, what I call the first real run. I did have a dry run of one where I just slopped everything in there. That's the far right one in this picture. The middle one was the second mold I pulled, the second cowling I pulled, and the left one is the first that's been primed. And folks, these turned out really, really good. So here's the 2 cowlings. Now keep in mind, I did not try to sand these and fill all the little bitty marks that might be in it. I just want to get some cowlings that are going to work, but they still turned out great. Here they are painted. I just used my airbrush little paint kit. Believe it or not, I had a color blue that was really close to the blue that Flex used. So I was really, really happy with the way this turned out. Now, a little bit about the silicone, folks. I bought this on Amazon. It's a kit. I think it's like 70 or 80 bucks. And it was about 75% of this filled up the little dam. So I had about 25% left over. That is the finished cowling test fit on the plane. Now, keep in mind, I just basically primed and painted these, folks. I didn't sand them down a lot, but I still think they look really good. They fit perfect. And I'm just really stoked. Now, there's a couple of things you need to think about if you're going to do this. You're only going to make 2 cowlings, so it might just be way too much work to do to make 2 cowlings. But I just wanted to, folks, if you followed me, and I'm coming up on my 500th video, by the way, but if you followed me, you know I just like to tinker. I do want to show you the disaster I had. So the very first attempt at this, I just completely screwed it up, blew it up, and it was just a really bad attempt. So this was the first one I did. The plug looked great. The 3D printed piece underneath it was okay, but the dam around it itself leaked a little bit. This is what it looked like when I took off the parts and pieces. But something really weird happened, folks, and I couldn't figure out what it was, and I was so stressed out, almost ready to give up. But if you look at the plug on the left, it never completely cured. There's still some of that silicone residue, or whatever you want to call it, the goop that's on that plug. It did not harden all the way for some reason. And I did this 2 times, okay? And I kept getting the same results. But if you look at this picture right here, see on the far right, I got my drill. I got my stirring thing for paint. You need to stir the hell out of this silicone stuff. I mean, you got to stir it for like 5 or 10 minutes and get it mixed up good. And then the mold will pull perfect and all your parts will work perfect. Folks, if you do not mix this stuff, because I was using a paint stirrer, hand doing it, and it didn't work. You got to use a powered stirrer to stir the silicone. Now, you want to know about weight. The original cowling weighed 5 grams. Okay. My cowling is fat, okay? But the plane's not going to give a crap. So basically, folks, I ended up at 15 grams, which is 3 times, but it's still just 15 grams, folks, okay? So that's it, folks. Thanks for watching the video. Please like and follow and share and tell the whole world about my channel. Take care and rock on.